Welcome to the Black Doctors Talk podcast. I am Dr. Kimberly West, host for this episode and member of the Black Doctoral Network. Today, I am joined by Dr. Chalice Rhodes. Dr. Rhodes is a licensed and board certified professional counselor since 2008. In 2020, she became a board certified TeleMental Health provider and provides virtual video professional counseling services in Florida, Georgia, and New Jersey. In her private practice, Dr. Rhodes focuses on helping adults, couples, families, and groups. Dr. Rhodes' passion to serve others has been evident throughout her childhood and career. Welcome, Dr. Rhodes. I'm delighted to speak with you today.
Thank you. Nice to talk to you, Dr. West.
All right, so I'm excited to begin our conversation, especially considering a lot of mental health type stuff has been in the news recently.
Yes.
So I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Okay.
So to begin our conversation, please tell our viewers and our listeners a little about your background. Where does it all begin for you?
Oh man, where it all begins for me takes it all the way back to my childhood. So I think feeling the absence of my father growing up and feeling that very deeply and always kind of wishing, I kind of had someone to kind of just talk to me about those things. I think looking around me, being observant and seeing people in crisis, and also being in a presence of this life-changing incident. I was actually in a presence of someone in crisis, and the person had looked me right in the eye, and the person said, "Help me, Chalice." And I was maybe 8 or 9. I felt so helpless, but in that very moment, something in that moment, I said, I'm going to help people when I get older. And I felt so relieved that the proper professionals were there to help that person. But that was a pivotal moment for me.
Wow. Wow. At 8 or 9?
8 or 9. 8 or 9 years old, I knew. I said, I'm going to help people. I am going to help people like out of crisis, help them work through their pain.
Wow. That's amazing.
Thank
I,
you.
I'm just like, wow. So somebody saw something in you in order to say something like that to you.
Oh my God. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. West. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, someone had to say they saw something in you. Wow. So to continue our conversation, let's talk a little bit about your professional life,
Yeah.
and building upon that experience you had, growing up. So what led you into the field of professional counseling? I know you talked a little bit about you knew you wanted to help people, but what led you into professional counseling?
Yes. So the next step in my journey, seventh grade year, we had a career counseling class. And it was the last year the middle school was having that class, I guess, due to budget cuts. And they had us take a career assessment. So I'm excited. I'm like, oh, yeah, I want to see which career because I know I'm going to be in a helping field. Sure enough, get the results from the career assessment. The career assessment says you will be great in the helping professions. So as a teacher, a counselor, a nurse, these are professions you should consider. And I'm like, the ones that stood out to me were counselor and teacher because I could see myself like being a teacher because I always like to plan and organize things and kind of develop things. Like I remember my mom brought me the Babysitters Club book series. And I don't know if you remember the Babysitters Club book series. So
Yes.
how about my mom brought me this series, Dr. West, and I created my own babysitters club. I was the president.
Wow.
I had a vice president. I had a treasurer, a secretary, and it was like my sister, a couple of our friends in the neighborhood. I started organizing. Okay, we're going to charge this much for our babysitting services. It was
Wow.
wild. So that career assessment class, it's almost like it just further encouraged me that, yeah, you're on the right track. And then when I got to high school, the 11th grade year, they introduced this class for the first time for juniors. It was psychology, sociology, and anthropology. So I'm like, what do I gravitate towards, psychology or sociology? By the end of that class, I said, oh, I want to be a psychologist.
Wow.
So from high school, I said, you know what? I'm going to be a psychologist. I'm going to be a therapist helping people. So then I went on to earn my bachelor's degree in psychology, my master's degree in clinical psychology.
Wow. That is it. Because sometimes you think you know in high school, but that's amazing that you figured that out really early.
I feel like that was God revealing my purpose to me. To be like quite honest, it was almost like God just revealing my purpose to me from that very young age, and then me following that trajectory.
Yeah, wow. That's fascinating. Because some of us took all kind of route, but you.
Now, listen, Dr. West, we're going to talk about these different routes that I took, though.
Well, come on, let's talk about them. What type of routes did you take?
Okay, so remember I said, "Oh, I'm going to be a I was telling my mom,
Yeah.
I'm going to be a psychologist. I'm going to be a psychologist." So finished my master's in clinical psychology degree, got to the first day of my doctor of psychology program. And something hit me. I'm sitting in this psychological testing class and I'm saying, wait a minute, I'm going to be taking psychological testing classes for the whole next year. Like, I want to do therapy. I want to sit across from people, hear people's stories, walk with them, help
Mhm.
them to heal. I'm like, I don't want to do psychological testing.
Mm.
It hit me that, oh my God, what separates a psychologist from other therapists in the field, like licensed professional counselors like myself, licensed clinical social workers, licensed marriage and family therapists, is that psychologists specialize in psychological testing.
Ah.
Hence the reason why I would have to take a whole year of psychological testing classes. And I said,
Mm.
no, that's not what I want to do. I'm going to withdraw from the program.
Mm.
I said, I'm going to start working in the field and then
Mhm.
I'll pray about where I want to go next.
Yeah. Yeah.
My mom was like, what? You always said you wanted to be a psychologist. What do you mean you're withdrawing from the psychology program? I'm like, Mom, I can't do these psychological testing classes for a year.
Yeah.
So check this out. I had the master's degree in clinical psychology, got my first job counseling. Oh my God. My first job as a counselor, children and families in
Yeah.
rural Georgia. I loved it. And
Wow.
so when I was doing the groups with the children, like I did individual counseling, couples, family, groups, when I started doing the group counseling with the children, I was like, you know what? I was teaching them different skills and concepts. I said, you know what? I want to teach this psychology counseling stuff. I said, you know what?
Mhm.
I think I want to be a therapist and a professor. So
Wow.
check this out, Dr. West. I started looking at doctoral programs that would give me that edge to break into the higher education field. And I
Mhm.
came across a doctor of philosophy degree in human services with a specialization in counseling studies from Capella University. And it worked
Wow.
perfect for me because I was already working in the field full time as a counselor. I was
Mhm.
earning my hours and supervision towards a full licensure because I was only licensed at an associate level.
Okay.
And this program was fully accredited, fully online, allowed me to still work as a therapist, honing my skills while also furthering my education in counseling studies. So that program allowed me to have very specialized classes like grief counseling,
Mm.
career counseling, very specific topics that people may come to you, for help with.
Yeah.
This program, I absolutely loved that program. I was able to do original research and everything. I investigated the sexual assertiveness characteristics of African American women.
Mm.
And it's a blessing because on ResearchGate, I will still see people who will cite my dissertation research. They send you emails like, you were cited by this
Yeah.
author.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So
Yeah.
that's very exciting. And so that's what I did. I earned my PhD in human services. And then I started applying for universities. I would apply for these adjunct professor positions, and the universities would say, oh, this looks great. We'll call you when we have a class. For years, never heard anything, Dr. West.
Mm.
And it is difficult to break into the higher education
Yeah.
field. Especially this was like back in 2005 to 2008 where I was trying to break in, and it just was like so difficult. And it was so oversaturated too in
Yeah.
Atlanta.
Yeah.
Right. But I did eventually break into the higher education field, eventually started teaching my first psychology class. Yes. So I taught psychology, counseling, marriage and family therapy, behavioral health counseling classes. And I did that for 9 years at 5 different universities
Wow.
while still working in the field. Now, once I got on with a certain number of universities, I think once I got on with 3 different universities, I came out of the field and decided to make working at these different universities my full-time job
Hmm.
because I knew that I wanted to have children and I wanted the flexibility of being able to be there for my children.
Right.
So
Right.
can you see how I have taken all of these different paths? It
Yes.
was not a straight trajectory for me.
Yes. Yeah.
I always wanted a full-time position in higher education. However, we know those are hard to come by.
Yeah.
And not to mention, we are underrepresented. Blacks are underrepresented in higher education.
Hmm.
But this position came available and I applied for the position. And I actually got my first assistant clinical professorship at Drexel University in
Wow.
Philadelphia. And I was an assistant clinical professor at Drexel for 3 years.
Okay.
And for a short period there, I was the behavioral health counseling director of the bachelor's program in behavioral health counseling. And
Mhm.
then when the pandemic hit, I thought, oh my God, I've always wanted to start my own practice. Right.
Wow.
But I was so caught up in higher education and kind of trying to achieve in that area. So presenting at different
Yeah.
conferences, developing classes online, like all kinds of stuff. But when that pandemic hit, I said, there's going to be a greater number of people in need. I have to start my private practice now. And it was just like this sense of urgency, get it started. It's like my purpose was calling me.
Hmm.
Get it
Hmm.
started. You always want to start your private practice. Get it started. Get it started. And so I started my private practice last year. I love it.
Hmm.
I have been in private practice full time now. Oh my God, Dr. West, you talk about living your purpose and the
Yes.
story I told you from when I was a
Yes.
little girl
Yes.
and that look that that person gave to me and said, Chalice, help me. And I said, I'm going to help people. I'm going to help people out of crisis. I'm going to help people heal. I'm living my purpose.
Wow. And it's funny because, sometimes people think take the pandemic as negative. Yes, there was a lot of negative stuff, but I see it as a thing that has propelled a lot of us into what it is we are supposed to be doing, or just putting us on the path to thinking that what we didn't think we could do, we really can do.
We can.
And I think that is wonderful. Can you talk a little bit more about the whole telemental health? Because I know because of the pandemic, telehealth is now a thing. I know I've been to a few telehealth type sessions with my doctor. So can you talk a little bit about that? How does that work?
Yeah, you know what? Let me tell you, people think, and it's so interesting, they think telehealth is new. Actually, telehealth has been around for years, and there's actually research to back up how effective it is.
Wow.
So, guess what? There is research to back up that in professional counseling sessions, and you see, I'm talking to you from my office,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So, people who attend sessions in person and who attend sessions like this, we're doing this will be an example of telehealth, same benefit, same outcome.
Wow.
You wouldn't think that, right? Because
Yeah.
now if we bring preferences into the conversation, there are some people who they're like, no, they want to feel your energy like in a room. They want to sit across like my chair. They want to sit across from you and that's the traditional way.
Yeah.
But what people don't understand is there's also a way that you can make a personal connection with someone right over the computer
Hmm.
and still kind of feel that same connection, still build that same rapport,
Yeah.
with your therapist. So actually, telehealth has been around. It did not just, but people do tend to think telehealth came about because COVID-19 forced all of the therapists. And it's true. There's many therapists who didn't do telehealth before. Pre-pandemic, there were therapists that did do telehealth, and there were therapists that did both. Now, for some, it was a big transition for a lot of therapists who were used to the traditional people coming to your office. The pandemic was such a huge adjustment for all of us,
Hmm.
but you have therapists who had to make that adjustment online. And,
Yeah.
some people were hesitant at first, like, oh my God, what? Some of those same people, some of my same colleagues who I talked to who at first were like, oh my God, we have to do counseling online, they are loving it. I'm in different therapist groups. We now have therapists considering moving their practice virtually
Wow.
and actually considering, because you have a lot of therapists who lease office space. So
Yes.
then it becomes a thing of, wait a minute, I have this overhead of this office space to lease. Do I want to continue to pay that office space, or can I make an office space in my home
Mm.
and have a home-based business?
Mm. And get the tax benefits.
Exactly.
Yes,
So you
that's
see how the
amazing.
pandemic, like you said, it caused a lot of turmoil. It caused a lot of problems for us. But if we can take situations and look at the good that can come out of something,
Yes.
look at that. That's a perfect example.
Yes, wow, yeah, and what I just keep hearing is, as I'm listening to you, is you're listening to those messages that are being told to you, and I think sometimes I know I struggle with that myself. If we can just begin to really listen to that, as those messages, that intuition that's calling you, that's telling you, that's leading you down your path and your destiny, you'll get to where you're supposed to be. And I'm gonna
Yeah.
take that mental note and just stick that right there. For today. So I feel like, yes, this is good for my soul today.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
today. Yes.
Dr. West, and you know what? It's like I couldn't have got to where I'm at today without my support system.
Yeah.
A support system is so important, but it's the combination of having a healthy support system.
Mhm.
Like my mom, like every time I think of a healthy support system, first person I think of is my mom.
Mhm.
I remember my mom used to pray with me. Like I remember like having to take like the graduate entrance exam. And I'm
Mhm.
like, oh my God, mom. Like I would get like test anxiety. And I would be like, Mom, I need you to pray for me. I have to take, and my mom would be in there praying for me. Like my mom has been just like that stable force. Like I'm like, Mom, I'm gonna do this. And mom, yep, you could do it. Go girl. And she'd be there to support me. So I think like having a healthy support system, because
Yeah.
we all know everybody has a support system, but everybody in our support system is not healthy.
Yes. That you listen. I, I I know what you're talking about there.
All
Uh,
right.
right.
So
Right.
we just need to keep it real and say our healthy support system.
Have the support system. Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
and I think a combination of that and being resilient, because what people don't understand is we all are so much more resilient than what we can ever imagine.
Hmm.
We really don't realize like how resilient we are when you face challenges and trouble. Are you going to just like fall over and like cry and just crawl into a hole? You might for a
Yeah.
couple days. Yeah, for a couple days. Nothing's wrong with that. Part of a healthy self-care plan is to feel your emotions. But
Yeah.
listen, you got to cry those tears and then you got to come back out and
Yeah.
you have to develop a plan moving forward. All
Yeah.
right. So this is what it is, and how are we gonna move forward?
Yes, yes, that's my philosophy for sure. And
Yes.
yes, you talked about your mom and having that healthy support system. I know, I would imagine as a professional counselor, you have a lot of things like kind of coming at you because you're talking to so many different people. How do you maintain your mental health? How do you stay centered? How do you stay good, as some might say?
Oh, yes. And let me tell you that is so important. So, utilizing my own therapist, as professionals, we have our own therapist too. We're human, just like another person is human. So, I mean, listen, we all go through life transitions.
Mhm.
And you need a professional to kind of help you and support you through life transitions. Listen, it's an actual strength. It is not a weakness, but
Yeah.
it's such a shame because in a Black community, reaching out for help is viewed as a weakness. No, it's not. It's a sign of strength. And it's not that you'll always need the help. You may only need additional support for this short period of time of this life transition you're going through.
Mm,
Now,
mm,
for me, I love to exercise.
mm.
Like I put basketball was my sport growing up. So I played basketball growing up. I like to stay active. I love to stay
Okay.
active with my sons. We go bike riding.
Okay.
I work out on the elliptical machine. I try to eat healthier. Let me keep it real. I cannot sit here and say I eat healthy. I
Yeah.
sometimes Sometimes I eat healthy, but
I
we're
know
gonna
what you.
have to be honest and say I strive to eat healthier. So moderation and balance in all things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love to garden. Oh my God. Can I just tell you, my entire home is surrounded by flowers.
Yes.
I love the garden. It's so relaxing. I love all things water. So I love to swim. I love to work out in the water. I love to just be near the water and in the sun, like all of these things to re-energize you. I love to engage in my healthy relationships. So I have healthy family relationships that I give my energy to, because we have to be careful on how we manage our energy.
Yes.
All right. So I protect my energy at all costs, right? So I
Yeah.
have healthy family relationships that I give my energy to. I have healthy friendships. I
Mm-hmm.
have healthy relationships with my children. And the key for me is balance.
Yeah.
Balance is so key. Balance in all things between faith, family, life, career, relationships,
Mm-hmm.
friendships,
Mm-hmm.
relationships with my sons.
Yeah, no, I get it. And that whole you mentioned two things. One, the whole stigma, I guess, in the Black community about counseling. I'm glad you mentioned that, because it is something, and it's like you said, it's not a bad thing. It's really not, and we need that, right? And everybody needs somebody to talk to, and
Yeah.
it's okay, because it's like you said, it could be for a season,
Yeah.
and not something that you have to feel is like, oh gosh, I'm going through this, and it's okay. Everybody needs that somebody. And I also liked how you said protect your energy. That's why I tell my coworkers, I said, listen, I have to protect my peace at all costs.
Yes.
You you know what I'm saying, like, you do you, honey, but for this right here, I got to protect my peace, and that's important.
It's so
And
important. It is so important, Dr. West. Like, you have to think of it, if you're always trying to save everyone else, and, we have a tendency to do that as women. The gender role is
yeah.
where we tend, and then in our community, we tend to be that person, right? That everyone goes to. You have a lot of women in the sandwich generation. So they're caring for their children, plus caring for their older parents. So they're
Yeah.
pulled between those two areas. But it's like, if you run out of gas and you run on
Yeah.
E,
Yep.
you're not going to have anything to give to the other people in your life.
Yeah.
So you have to
Yeah.
have the balance. You have to have the balance. And it's really important to practice self care. And all of those things I talked about are examples of self care. But I also want to make the point that self care goes so much deeper. Because when you say
Mm.
self care, most people think manis, pedis, facials, spa day. Yes, that's examples of self care. But that's like a
Mm.
very superficial level of self care.
Mm.
Having healthy boundaries and maintaining healthy boundaries, having healthy relationships, feeling your emotions, letting go of negative attachments, letting go of
Mm.
things that no longer serve you
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
your
That's
purpose in the
powerful.
season.
That's really powerful. Because I was gonna say ice cream. That's my self care. No.
Yes, people think of, right. We tend
Yeah.
to think of like more superficial things, but
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
deeper things, nourishing your body, caring for yourself, but really like healing your trauma. You may
Yeah.
have experienced trauma in childhood, healing that. How do you heal that? You come to us therapists and we will walk alongside you and help you.
Wow. And so I just want to touch a couple more questions. I could talk to you all afternoon. I'm just saying. And I just want to touch on a couple more career-based questions. So, who has had a tremendous impact on your career?
Okay, I would have to say when I was an undergraduate, I volunteered. I was working on my degree in psychology. I was also working part time as a bank teller, and I was volunteering as a rape crisis counselor at a rape crisis center. And I had this director, her name was Mary Ann Giello, and she was a licensed clinical social worker. And I always had conversations with her about where I wanted to, how I wanted to further my education. Because,
Mm-hmm.
excuse me, after earning my bachelor's degree in psychology, I wanted to work in the field to make sure I really wanted to work
Right.
in psychology. And I was
Right.
like pondering, what should I get a master's in? Should I get a master's in psychology? Should I get a master's in social work? It was really between those two areas. And she was a
Mm.
licensed clinical social worker. So, of course, she was trying to encourage me towards clinical social work. I did lean towards psychology, though.
Yes, that's what we do, right? We try to tell people, go, we love it. You should do it too.
Right?
um, and so what has been your biggest accomplishment to date?
You know what, Dr. West, my biggest accomplishment is finally achieving that balance that I talk about. The balance that I encourage my clients to have, the same balance that I encourage for myself when I
Mhm.
see people who come to me who are feeling overwhelmed and are out of balance in all of these other areas, and they start
Mhm.
gaining that balance and the difference that that makes in their life.
Yeah.
It's tremendous. So I would
Yeah.
have to say the balance between faith, family, career, life, friends, healthy friendships, healthy relationships, like literally, like it's I feel so blessed to be living my purpose. Like my work does not feel like work. That's a
Yes.
blessing.
Yes.
Because we have all had jobs where we're like, oh God, is it time to go to work?
Yes. Yes.
You
As
know?
soon as you get there,
So
is it time to go home?
I know. We've all been there, right? But then it's like I finally have reached this place where I'm like, oh my God, this is my purpose. And I think back to that 8 or 9 year old girl that
Yeah.
had these big dreams and big visions and envisioning, because I always envisioned having my own private practice. And now it's like I've been sitting here living my dream and my purpose for a little over a year now. And oh my God. But it's the balance that I have with it too.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Because as helpers, there is that tendency to try to help everybody. And it's like, well, you can't help everybody. That's why God made a bunch of us therapists out here. you know, we
Yes.
have to have balance as therapists too. Like I have to have time to recharge and refuel and actually practicing what I preach, right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
can't be in sessions with, my clients saying, hey, practice self-care. How do you do it? And then I'm not over here doing it,
Right. You have to break down as they're talking to you, You're like, oh. No, I know, I get it. I get it. No, and that's so true, because again, we do try to do so much for everybody else, and that's something I know that I've had to learn throughout my life,
Yes,
of because I've been told, that whole, if you don't take care of yourself, and I was like, no, 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 whatever. But then if something clicked and I was like, they were right. Oh my God.
yeah, and not to bring in that other concept, but while we're talking about it, we might as well also talk about the strong Black woman archetype that is quite evident in our community because it's in our blood, it's in our DNA, it's just what we do. We've
Yeah.
seen our grandmothers do it, we've seen our mothers do it, and now we're doing the same thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So a
Yeah.
lot of times in our community, we don't reach out for help because it's a sign of weakness. There's still a stigma in our community. And guess what? A lot of times when we finally do reach out for help, we are so burned out
Mm-hmm.
from trying to be everything to everybody.
Yeah.
But what I say to people is at least you made it. I'm
Yeah.
glad you made it here.
Yes, yes, and that's true. Yeah, because again, yeah, the people think it's admirable to wear that S on, that superwoman S on your chest, and oh no, honey, you about to go off a cliff. Please do something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I say, why accept this strong Black woman archetype? I reject it, and I do not want anyone to force that upon me.
Mm,
Now, it's one thing if I decide, because I don't have to be a strong Black woman all the time.
yeah.
Yes, I am strong. Yes, we are strong. Yes, we know we can be strong. But when did this thing come about where we have to be strong 100% of the time, all the time for everybody? No, we're not perfect. We're human.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we are strong. However, I don't want to be strong today.
Hey, listen, I'm
I
for it.
don't want to be strong. I don't
Hey,
want to be a strong Black woman today.
yes, yes.
You know?
Listen. I am for everything. Amen. 100% what you have said today.
Yeah. And check this out, Dr. West. Not being strong doesn't mean I'm saying I'm falling apart. I'm not doing that either. I'm not saying, okay, so if we're not strong, we're weak. Nope, we're
Mhm.
not doing the polar opposites. What I'm saying is I'm bringing it back to that word of balance,
Yeah.
moderation,
Yes.
everything in moderation. We do not have to be everything to everybody all of the time. Ladies, we need to reject that.
Yes.
And we need to bring balance into our lives so that we can function optimally.
Yes. 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 Oh, oh, I have a few more questions for you.
Okay.
I'm gonna make them quick.
Okay.
What advice would you give someone wanting to pursue a career similar to yours?
Okay. Best advice I give to all of my students. Well, because I was a professor, so I'm used to actually answering this question in terms of students. Okay, if you want to be a therapist, at the very bare minimum, no, to be a therapist, all you need is a master's degree.
Mm,
Now, to be a therapist, there's different kind of therapists. You can be a licensed professional counselor, such as myself. You
mhm,
can be a licensed clinical social worker, such as my director I described earlier. You can be a licensed marriage and family therapist.
mm,
If you want to be a psychologist, you have to earn a doctoral degree in psychology.
mm,
Now, a psychologist, you can be a therapist just like the master's level therapist. But
mm.
what separates a psychologist from the other therapists is that you will learn how to do psychological testing and specialize in psychological testing. That's what separates you from, that's what separates a psychologist as a therapist. A psychologist has a doctoral degree.
Mm.
A master's level therapist, you can be a therapist with a master's degree in clinical social work, counseling, marriage and family therapy. Now, you can do what I did, for example, and say, hey, I want to teach in higher education, and you can earn a doctoral degree. So, whether or not I earned that doctoral degree in human services with a specialization in counseling studies, I was qualified to be a therapist anyway, as long as I completed my hours.
Okay.
I did the extra doctoral education because I knew I wanted to work in higher education. And I really do believe earning a PhD, because higher education, they look for that doctor of philosophy degree
Mhm,
versus a practice degree. Like
mm.
in psychology, they have a doctor of psychology degree,
Oh,
and
okay.
that's more practice oriented.
Gotcha.
PhD, Doctor of Philosophy, is more research oriented. So remember earlier, I was saying I conducted original research,
Mhm, mhm.
right?
Right.
So for people who want to become a therapist, know that you can become a therapist, and the licensure laws are important. Whatever state you want to practice in, you have to make sure that the degree that you earn lines up with that state licensure law. Right now in the field, we're working on this portability compact law, where license can be ported from state to state, because what happens is you get licensed in one state, you move to another state,
Right.
the state doesn't want to accept the credentials, or sometimes they do, sometimes there's reciprocity, sometimes there's not.
Mhm. Wow, that's a lot of good information, and I like that you differentiated those too. That's great because sometimes people don't realize that.
Yes.
Um, how has your affiliation with the Black Doctoral Network helped you personally and or professionally?
Oh my God. I'm so happy to have found the Black Doctoral Network. I served on a Black women's health panel at the conference a few years ago in Newark, New Jersey, with these two other phenomenal women. And we talked about Black women's health. And, I talked about the strong Black woman archetype and African
Mhm.
American women, because my colleague and I, Dr. Bernice Kennedy, actually developed a multifaceted model of depression in African American women.
Wow.
And it talks about, one of the things it talks about is the strong Black woman archetype, and how that serves us in both negative and positive ways.
Hmm.
And the other person on the panel, she presented her research on African women. And
Hmm.
then the other person on the panel presented from a Caribbean perspective in Canada. So the Black Doctoral Network, and I am sure Miss Deandra Taylor was behind this, along with others. But
Mhm.
they actually assembled us into a panel, and our one panel spanned African Americans, Africans, and Caribbeans living in Canada.
Wow.
And we talked about health. We talked about mental health and self care, and it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal.
Wow. So, my last question for you, enjoying this wonderful conversation. What is next for you? What's next for you?
Oh man. All right, Dr. West. What's next for me is continuing. All right, my private practice has three pillars: professional counseling, continuing education training, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and consulting. I told you I've been in practice for years. So now that I have the clinical portion, the clinical pillar of my practice built solid, thank you, Jesus. Now I want to work on those other two pieces. So the continuing education training and the diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting. I really want to build those areas up. So more to come on that.
Wow, that's amazing. I am so like, wow, you've given me a lot to think about. So I want to truly thank you for joining us today. And can you please tell our viewers and listeners where they can go to learn more about you and the work that you're doing?
Yes, please visit my website at drchalice.com. Also, head on over to my YouTube channel, drchalice.com. Subscribe to my channel so you can watch videos of Talk the Wellness Tea with Dr. Chalice, where
Ooh,
I present just enlightening, uplifting topics, holistic topics about health and wellness. I am also on Instagram. My handle is at Dr. Chalice. I'm on Facebook, drchalice.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. Chalice C. Rhodes. So please join me. I would love to connect with you all.
wow. So again, thank you. Please be sure to stay connected to the Black Doctorial Network and connect with us on all of our social media channels. Thank you for joining us for the Black Doctors Talk podcast. We hope you will join us again next time. But for now, be sure to like, share, subscribe, and please tell a friend.